everybody. Welcome back to another world-building bonus episode of the podcast. Been a little while since we've done one of these. I think September might have been the last one. Either way, it was prior to our current storyline, the Halls of Zenden. So, yeah, it has been a while. I'm joined once again by Eden.
Hello, hello.
How's it going?
Not too shabby, sir. Not too shabby at all.
Good stuff. I think you were on the last world-building one, wasn't it? But it must have been mid-August we did that.
I forget. I think there might have been one after me, but I really can't think back that far because my memory's shot to pieces.
Braining is hard. I'm using braining as a verb because.
Well, the last year's turned into a weird fog of Groundhog Day-like experiences, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint these moments.
Yeah. Yes, the last world-building one was me and you, and we talked about the Panacea War. That was it. Sorry. Look through that, and that was a while back. So I'm always happy to talk more about our custom setting, and it's always a fun discussion. Today we're going to be talking about the kind of magical sort of authority in our setting of Vallanna, which is the Grand Arcaneum. You can already read a little bit about them on our World Anvil page. Incidentally, I have a feeling that any of the stuff we come up with is going to contribute to this. We are taking part in this year's World Ember event as well, which is basically a writing event on World Anvil to write 10,000 words in December. So, hopefully we'll get some stuff out of this to contribute towards that. But, there was a lot of fun.
You're well on the path as well. Like, people, go and have a look at the World Anvil page. AJ has put an incredible amount of effort into this. There is a large amount of detail that if you just listen to the podcast, then there's just a ton that you're missing, ultimately. Yeah,
and there's a ton of stuff that we've talked about on these previous world-building episodes, which I 100% have not written up.
Likewise, I'm terrible. I think on just about every one of these that we've ever done, I've said at some point, oh yeah, I'll write that bit up. I never have. I'm terrible.
I think that the onus is more on me than you, I think, with that one, really. But, I mean, even going back to, like, the first one we did, we were talking about the big towns and cities and whatnot? Mm-hmm. I think I wrote one article out of that, and I've kind of gotten around to one or two after that. But that was over a year ago. And I'm just,
Well, it's all there, verbally represented. People can listen to it rather than read it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is an audio medium. That's, use your ears. Anyway, I'll obviously check all the usual places for links and stuff. I think I'll probably put a link in the podcast description to our site as well. That's probably an easy way of doing it. But yeah, we have our own World Anvil page for our setting. Yes, we are going to be talking about the sort of magical authority. In my mind, it's kind of like, almost like the sort of, considered by most to be kind of like the official magical organization, if that makes sense. But not in kind of like a Hogwarts is the only magic school in the Harry Potter. This is more just sort of like it's got the closest ties to the government and stuff, and generally they're sort of officially sanctioned with whatever they do, sort of thing. Yeah,
if they're the most connected organization, they're going to get access to things that others won't, which will kind of give them a edge for the entire time. Like nobody else is going to out-edge them because. Yeah, as I say, they're going to get the first dribs and drabs of information from the government, the politicians, the royalty, whoever might be involved in some intrigue or the major ongoings of the world. These guys are going to find out about it first, probably.
Yeah. I mean, and I had in mind that maybe like the head of the organization, the sort of the Grand Master, is maybe he's got the ear of the king at all times or whatever. It's sort of he's a close friend or an important advisor of sort of, okay, something magical has come up, I'm going to call the head of the Arcanium, rather than, a sort of a prime kind of representative in magical matters sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that, like I say, there's close ties there. As I say, I have written a fair amount already about them, but it's been kept mostly kind of vague. Partly in mind recording this episode at some point, which we're obviously now doing, but also partly because I'm incredibly uncreative when I'm just sat staring at my computer screen going, oh, I should write some stuff. But
it can all feel a bit arbitrary when you're by yourself, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Whereas I feel like we always get some interesting things out of these discussions, which sort of sends me off down different brain paths or whatever. So I think I'll probably best to sort of give a bit of a rundown of kind of where I'm at with this organization. Some of it is not going to be in the article; it's not already in the article, so we'll sort of fill you in on where my kind of well, everything's sort of headcanon until I write it down, I suppose. But basically, the previous sort of era of our world was known as the Age of Arcane Might, which was a sort of long, sort of 2,000-year period of history where basically the land was ruled by a series of sort of warring, incredibly powerful magic users with basically no oversight. Who, you know, if you had magical power, they subdued the people without magical power. They used it to sort of take over and things. There was lots of sort of disastrous things kind of happened in that time of history, sort of to a point where it almost reached a kind of stalemate. And a bit of a sort of common thought of like, we probably shouldn't let things carry on like this, should we? We need to rein it in a little bit. A lot of people are getting killed here. And that was sort of the turning of the age into the current sort of era of our world called the Age of Unification. My thought I had was that the Arcanium's original sort of purpose was a kind of almost like a sort of UN of powerful mages and stuff. I
like that. Yeah, I like that a lot, because if they're going to have to come together and stop being at each other's throats and stop dominating the world through their magic, it's going to have to be some kind of diplomacy. It's going to have to be sit around the table and chat for a while and figure out what the rules are.
Yeah. And sort of very quickly that sort of morphed into sort of less like, oh, we're going to rule things, and more sort of, okay, I don't want to use the sort of mutually assured destruction, but more sort of like, okay, we're all aware of the power that we hold. We maybe, with that in mind, should make sure that people are taught to do it safely, because if we keep screwing around, the people who aren't magic users are probably going to rise up in one way or another, and there's going to be bloodshed in one way or another. So they've sort of almost willingly stepped back from positions of power, almost, to sort of more of a kind of...
Sorry, it might be like a moment where these aren't necessarily like bad guys. These are just wizards that have gotten a little bit too powerful for their own good. And it might be that maybe one or two of them took a step back and went, are we turning into the bad guys? Is this... like, are we actually about to do terrible things to the whole world because we can't stop ourselves? And that could have been that sentiment you're talking about.
I feel like that's already happened, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, obviously, yeah. If you look at the map, you can see the devastation.
Yeah. I've kind of. I mean, we've had a couple of sort of inciting events, sort of. One of which I've written about, and we've talked about previously. I think Amy and I talked about it. Maybe. Oh no, we talked about the comet impact. I don't think I've actually spoken. Well, when we were doing an episode as part of a previous World Anvil event, actually. But I kind of use that as a sort of jumping off point to explain why half of our map is this giant magical desert.
We did talk about it. It was some time ago. We were talking about the idea of a wizard being at the top of one of the towers and maybe like launching some absurd spell that devastated the land in front of them. I can remember that quite strongly.
Sort of, yeah. It was the idea I had was basically like the planet was hit by a comet. Not quite fully deep impact Armageddon size, but enough to cause a lot of damage. And in their sort of, they're in a sort of early kind of conclave, maybe even like a version of this Arcanium sort of UN type thing. A lot of the powerful ones came together and went, well, we can't let this happen again. You know, we've got the power to stop it. So they built this giant tower. A lot of them got involved in this big sort of ritual to like, we will make a magical shield around the planet to stop this from happening ever again. You know, people will be safe. And at some point, the ritual went wrong and basically backfired, vaporized the tower and all the people within it, and basically scoured the land for hundreds of miles around of life, and turned it into this kind of magical wasteland, which is still here, sort of 2,000 years later, kind of thing. So I think that's one of the major events of this Age of Arcane Might, which was like, oh, whoop, we made a fuck up here.
Oopsies.
The other one I had in mind, which was less of a kind of accident and more of a sort of act committed, which I haven't really talked about, but is kind of hinted at on the map again. Although I haven't really got an exact date in mind for when this happened, only that it was during this Age of Arcane Might. So I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to have it be before this sort of the waste we created, or afterwards, because it is kind of in the same sort of area, is that sort of as part of a magical war, the people of the city of Solara, which is in the north of what is now the Amethyst Isles, were at war with another magical sort of person to the south who built a tower, which is on the map as El Alcar Tower. Basically, the person who ran the tower was like, nope, I'm going to take them out, burn through all of his acolytes' power, killing them, and fired this kind of, basically, like, I don't know, it sounds like Super Dragon Ball Z and stupid. But
I like Dragon Ball Z well enough.
Yeah, but like a kind of big beam weapon north towards them, which kind of shattered the landscape and made, broke all these bits of the land off and made it, which are now islands, but were originally connected, sort of carving this. I think we might have talked about it when we talked about Rifyu way back in the day.
I do remember this, yes.
Yeah. So that's the only other sort of kind of giant magical thing I've got in mind. Obviously, many, many others.
Well, these are enough. Like these two major events, because one of them is them trying to be helpful and kind of cocking it up, and the other one is arguably just power unchecked.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, these are two examples of many, I would think, that we haven't written yet from the Age of Arcane, which sort of led the cooler heads to prevail, and then to step back and go, yeah, let's put a whole halt on this, like, wielding our powers, unresponsibly sort of thing.
Yeah, I can't help but think that the end of the Age of Arcane would have led to, like, there would have been a kind of cleanup period where you'd have almost had to have had, like, not necessarily knights, but kind of like agents of the Grand Arcaneum going out into the world to kind of mop up small level despots and the magical tyrants that might be out there that the local populace can't do anything about, and they've gotten away with it for ages because everybody else is busy doing the same thing elsewhere, doing their version of whatever. But now it's time to go around and kind of, in a way, actually be the hero of the people by releasing them and saying, okay, right, time for magic users to kind of sort themselves out, I suppose.
Just knock on the wizard's tower. Take a look at yourself, mate. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that, actually, because so I was getting onto this. The thing I've kind of had in mind for the sort of the Arcanium in the now of our time is that, now that's a weird sentence, man. In the now of our time, in the now of our setting, is that it's basically got two kind of focuses, and the first one is this sort of supervised kind of safe education in magical stuff to people who want to be, to people who are willing and have the power and want to, become magic users. They're not stopping people from becoming magic users. They're just making sure they kind of learn in a safe way and learn not to use it to enslave people and stuff.
Yeah.
And the other focus is basically, as you say, being the kind of cleanup crew almost, of like, there's a weird magical event or something, or somebody's wielding some weird artifact. We should probably take that out of their hands just for the safety of everybody, kind of thing. So they're sort of part school, part, I don't know, what would you call them? Like sort of
world police.
Yeah. So they've got a lot of kind of safe houses and vaults and things that stuff is just like, okay, we'll just put this away and nobody needs to know about it anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah. The archivist could be the only guy that knows, and he'll die eventually.
You guys have, funnily enough,
will come down here.
Yeah. Well, you guys have, funnily enough, already run into one of those artifacts. Very much.
Is that the Eye of Malar?
The Eye. Well, no. The Eye of Malar is just I mean, not to kind of knock it back. That's basically just a spell focus. Yeah, that's not a dangerous thing, really.
I was so focused on it. Sorry. Part of me is prance.
Yeah. Oh no, don't get me wrong. It's still powerful. You've got an inbuilt dimension door spell in that, isn't it? That's a decent artifact. But it's not really the kind of thing that they would get fully like, oh no, we need to lock this away. Because you would need a certain amount of magical power to use it anyway, which you have. So yeah, there you go. They're not worried about that. What they are worried about is the one that caused the time bubble that you guys were locked in when we last saw you. I've called it the Eye of Moments. If you remember, it was sort of hit by a rogue spell and was sparking off and had basically killed everybody in the village, and locked you in a time bubble. So
I'm stuck in that moment.
Yeah, you're still in the time bubble. Well, technically, it did come down at the end of the episode, but we haven't yet caught up to that moment when we get back to you guys. So yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Like, okay, this probably shouldn't be in the wrong hands, really, should it? This is basically a weird time machine orb. Maybe we keep this. Maybe we keep this under lock and key. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Of like, okay, so yeah, they're teaching people to use stuff safely, and they're taking unsafe stuff off the board. Is basically their kind of focus in the current sort of land. So I like the idea, that, like you said, that it's sort of that second focus has come from this history of like, okay, we need to, if we're going to move into this new era, we need to really make sure we put a full stop at the end of the crap that was going down before, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that people know that it's a combined effort. That it's not just like, this isn't a flash in the pan. This is the way mages will be, or the wizards, the whole of magic. This is the way people will act from now on.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of a PR thing as well, isn't it? It's like, oh no, don't go. You know, not all wizards are, here to enslave you. We're the good guys. See, please don't just murder someone because they walk into the village with a staff.
And that way, there might have been some places where normal humanity, as it were, was kind of slowly mounting a force, and that they need to be placated a little bit, and that this is a show of good faith. Like, hey, look, we might not be like, you might be able to get us here, but if you look over there where you might not know how bad things were, look, we helped, and now you don't want to get us, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm perfectly open to there being like a bit of a cynical, self-serving layer to it, rather than just being this full kind of like, no, we must save humanity from ourselves sort of thing. It's also like, if we don't, people are going to start grabbing the torches and pitchforks, and we don't really want that.
It's human nature, ultimately.
Yeah. There's a lot of them, and well, we got a lot of power. We got to sleep at some time, sort of thing. So yeah, no, I like that that second purpose is maybe the secondary purpose. Maybe a lot of people will never even hear of that sort of thing of like, okay, they're investigating, they're doing stuff, because the primary thing that if people think of when they think of the Arcanium is going to be, oh, that's where so and so who like magic went and studied, or oh yes, they're the magic people. Just they've got this sort of, a lot of people have heard of them. Maybe not everybody, but they're kind of there in the public consciousness as like, oh, this is the almost feel like a bit of a government of magic sort of thing.
Yeah. Or in that way where people go off to train with them, like a guild of sorts.
Yeah, no, totally, yeah. As I say, and I don't really want them to have like a monopoly on magic. I mean, we've already kind of heard of, and we talked about where you had the members of the staff. They were their own thing.
Yeah, and their silliness would almost certainly mean that they would not be welcome at the Grand Arcaneum.
Oh yeah. No, and as I say, I think the Arcanium don't have the monopoly. It's like they can't force someone to join.
Yeah,
but it's kind of
benign, I suppose. If you're just off studying magic and you're not actually messing around with people and doing things that are questionable, then they'll probably just leave you to it.
Yeah.
Wonder why you might, and then go, yeah, those guys, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they can sort of, if you're say you're a young person with an interest in magic, but you don't want to study at the Arcanium, they're not going to say study with us or stop doing magic. They maybe would heavily court you as like a sort of, hey, we can teach you some stuff sort of thing, but they can't force you to go, really. A lot of people might go because it's got there's a lot of resources there, there's a lot of stuff to learn, there's a lot of knowledge in their organization, but there's going to be people who are going to go like, I'm not going with you, I know what I'm doing. So they might keep an eye on them, and just in case they do anything different, anything sort of dangerous or whatever, but they can't force people to do it, to get involved, sort of thing.
It's hard not to think that the political factor of those alignments that the Grand Arcanium has with government and what have you would predispose certain people to not want to work with them.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I think actually even kind of came up in the last episode. I think I mentioned it to Katie when we were sort of talking about what Celeste's sort of magical background was. I said like she hasn't studied with them, at all. And she said, "Oh no, she's sort of self-taught, kind of thing." So I don't think there's anything stopping people from. They're not stopping people from learning magic. They're just promoting themselves, maybe as like, "Hey, this is a good, we can teach." They're almost sort of putting themselves forward as like, "We have the knowledge. Come and study with us." And then along the way, they'll teach it in a safe way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are going to be drawn in of like, well, they know what they're doing. They can teach me how to do it. I think, that's pretty much a good rundown of kind of where I'm at, really. I've got some other back end stuff written of like sort of like titles, sort of as people go through the learning side of things and like who's in charge of it. But really, that's kind of all I've got and sort of set in stone. And even then, set in stones. That's all changeable. Sort of thing.
Where we go. So yeah, what did you want to work on? Coming up with a leader for the whole thing. It's difficult. Would you want it to be the kind of thing where he's a figurehead and there's a certain amount of his behaviors and what have you that he would have like trickle down into the people that he puts underneath him, as it were? Does he have that kind of power? Is it a committee and he's been elected? Is it that he's the most powerful? He or she or they or whatever the hell they are?
It's in the article that I've written already, but like I say, it can all be changed. I kind of sort of said that it's led by someone who's like the Grand Master, and he's like the leader of what I've called the High Circle, but it's basically a council of the 12 most powerful and wise members.
Now, when you say wise, that immediately brings in a certain amount of like, that's a subjective thing,
yes,
and politicking and all that kind of stuff. Like, how much would you want that to be a factor is part of the question here. And I feel like there's an inevitability if there is subjectivity to like who should be on the council, that vying for those positions.
Yeah,
would be part of the deal. Like, and what are they worth? What can those positions lend to a wizard? That like what's the point of being in that position?
I think the positions are going to come with a certain amount of influence within the Arcanium and also outside of it, because the people in power, political power and such, if you say, "Oh, I'm a master of the High Circle," that's going to have a lot more cachet with them rather than just being like, "Oh, I graduated from the Arcanium,"
Yeah. I'm thinking alongside that though, in terms of like on the wizardry level, like would being in one of those positions give you access to the vaults or something like that? I'm just thinking in terms of what are the perks, because if it is purely political, then that really gives it an overall tone to the purpose of the Arcanium that's much more shifted towards that, which might be fair at this point.
I think there probably is a certain level of political sort of maneuvering that goes about it. If you're already on the council, you've probably got a bit of sway as to like if somebody's retiring or has died who's on the council, or how we haven't got a mechanism for how people are leaving it, but you've probably got a bit of sway to sort of put your particular sort of recommendation for a spot forward, sort of thing. If you're already on the council, you've got a bit of sway. You're in power. You're in the position of power there, and you've. I'm presuming we could sort of say they almost elect their own members, kind of thing. So, if there's someone who is a little bit radical, or at least doesn't get along with certain members of the council, no matter how powerful they are, they maybe aren't getting on it. Which could lead to rogue wizards or whatever, who are just like the sort of Anakin Skywalker kind of analog there of like,
it is that classic like, you're going to restrict me, so I'm going to do it myself and fuck all you guys, I'm out of here kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of I think the idea that sort of they are a bit sort of, once they get in that position, that you end up being on the council for a long time, and like you say, there's a lot of leeway in the word wise, sort of thing, so that they might end up sort of over time kind of their kind of internal politics shifting and such. The idea that probably if you are on the council, you do have access to the vaults, or at least the influence you have would kind of, the implication would be that you've made it to the council, so nobody's really going to question if you go down to the vaults, if that makes sense. Whether that means, I'm assuming not most of the time it wouldn't be sinister, but who's going to question you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for research purposes mostly that this would be the kind of thing where a young wizard might one day aspire to get to that position because he's heard about a relic and he must examine it. He just has the feeling of like, oh, I must see this thing with my own eyes, and doesn't necessarily have any kind of like sinister connotation about it.
Yeah, but only a council member could sign off on them seeing it or something.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that like adds to an aspiration that wouldn't be the main reason why they aspire to get into that position, but it's one of those things that they would kind of like, they'd probably have a little tally in their mind of like, these are all the things I will do, these are the things I will be able to do when I get to that position.
Yeah, so without anyone looking over my shoulder sort of thing. Yeah, definitely. I do think it is an aspirational thing of like, so that's part of the reason why I wrote powerful and wise. So it might be that there's one or two there who are sort of naturally gifted in magic, but can be a bit unpredictable, and they're sort of powerful. But there's ones who have been elected to the council that maybe they're not quite as good at throwing weird color spray spells or whatever, but they know what they're talking about and they're quite level-headed, and they command the respect of a lot of people, sort of thing.
Yeah. They're the guys that make the place run, as it were,
for sure.
They're not so fussed about doing the spells and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've written the guy that you ran into at the end of that arc, that Madai the Chronomancer. I kind of had him written. I haven't updated his page yet, so it's not quite in line with the current state of the Arcanium article. But I had it in mind that he was one of these council members, but he was a bit of a wild card sort of thing. Kind of kept his own council, sort of, and but because of his specialty, which is time magic, they kind of let him just get on with it, because maybe if there's 12 members of the council, maybe 9 of them had no clue what he was even doing, sort of thing, or how they would go about doing what he's doing. But he's undoubtedly one of the most powerful, sort of thing, so it makes sense for him to be on there. But they've got they'd just be like, I have no idea what he's up to in his place, sort of thing.
It's the kind of magic as well where ultimately, if you did play your hand, if you had some reason to like try and get at this guy or try and rein him in a little bit, I guess, he could just go through time potentially to a point before then. And like, you might have gone through that many times. And then as a wizard yourself, knowing that that's possible, you'd find yourself second guessing yourself all the time. Being like,
am I only doing this because he wants me to?
Yeah, have I tried to take him down 1,000,000 times before and it's never worked?
This is just attempt number 73. I'm just stuck thinking of like time loop episodes. I'm a big fan of time loop episodes in TV series and stuff, but like that Stargate one where O'Neill and Teal'c are caught in the time loop, and one time they just take the loop off and play golf into the Stargate.
Yeah,
and
everybody's like, "What the hell are you doing
in the middle of my backswing?" But I like that sort of the level of uncertainty there, that he might be there. They're just like, we'll just let him get on with it, because who knows really what he's doing. Sort of
that's some very unpredictable power, and the kind of power is the same way. It's like, if you're not capable yourself of doing it, you've kind of got no chance. Just in general terms, like, what could you do against somebody that could potentially just negate any fight you have? Like, oh, I'm losing, boom, I go back in time.
Like, he's gone so far down his own sort of specialization that there's no one even close to him in terms of like understanding what that is about, but they need somebody to be able to understand it, so he's their guy, sort of thing.
It's so esoteric.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it would be good if we could maybe come up with at least who's the current Grandmaster.
Okay.
That might be an idea. And in my head, I've got it as kind of like maybe being like a sort of, I mean, I'm sort of a little bit reluctant to lean back into Harry Potter, but a sort of Dumbledore style, got the respect of all kind of figure. At least at the moment, if that makes sense. He's the current Grandmaster.
A very high-level jack of all trades.
Yes.
Who's also sensible to boot.
Yeah, he's level-headed. He's not like fully out there like wild card, baby. just like insanely powerful. He's very powerful, but like he's known for sort of commanding a lot of respect, sort of thing. I realize this is kind of a little bit of a kind of, I don't want to say boring character, but I feel like we need an anchor point to be like, there's a reason why he's been should we say he's been elected? Is the Grandmaster elected from them? Is that what we're...
Yeah, I think that would be the best idea, is that ultimately there are 13 positions on the council, you might say, with the top one being the Grand Master.
Yeah.
And then at some point, maybe whether it's a retired position potentially, like so whenever the Grand Master either dies or retires, that's when the vote is held for the next one, and that's when a new member is brought to the table as well at the same time.
They decide
it could be voting on both sides of that all of the table votes for not only the Grand Master going up, but the new person coming in.
Kind of like a pope. From the because it's obviously from the College of Cardinals, isn't it? I think
I don't know the rules for
I don't know really either, but I'm mainly basing it on that Angels and Demons movie, which is the sequel to the Da Vinci Code. I don't know a lot about Catholic stuff.
Dogma's about as far as I've ever got. I mean, I've read bits of the Bible, but not the Catholic stuff.
Yeah, but let's base it on my completely lacking understanding of the Catholic Church and say that yes, it's kind of they elect from within themselves who's going to lead them, and that vacates a spot.
Okay,
that kind of works, doesn't it? I think. Because then you don't end up with like it's the same people for 50 years and they just take it in turns being the leader, you know.
Yeah. Especially with the longevity that's possible.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That could be like 100. Yeah. This guy's been on the seat for 200 years, and
it could even be more. I mean, like humans have still got sort of human ages, but like a kind of gnomes live 200 odd years, and dwarves are 300 and. So, you know, it's sort of...
I can really stretch out.
You get elected young, you know. if it's a choice thing, maybe there is, like, term limits. But maybe that could then lead to, like, every once in a while they have a sort of check of, like, are we happy with this person? Are we happy for them to keep going? Or should we choose
I guess, of sorts.
Yeah.
He's got a campaign to keep the position, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I would think that unless, you know, stuff's going wrong, maybe it is almost like a bit of a given that they sort of just, you know, just wave it through sort of thing. Like, okay, are we all happy? Yeah, okay, cool. I think the one thing I have kind of said, I think on an episode, I definitely haven't written it, is that maybe the elves kind of keep their own council with magic stuff. So there's maybe not too many pure elves in the Arcanium.
That might make it all the more interesting to make the Grandmaster an elf, if that's the case.
Possibly.
That they might even potentially struggle a little bit, because within the politicking, there would potentially be a little bit of, oh, well, those snooty elves, they think they're too good to be around here, and I guess these few that have turned up, well, I don't know about that. And that this guy or girl or whoever has made it up through the ranks in spite of that, because they have shown proficiency that in perhaps each of the disciplines that each of the other guys and girls at the table might have, they've shown like, hey, I understand that. Maybe they're not the best at it, but whenever they've interacted, they've shown an appreciation of the other person's work, as it were.
Yeah.
And then that could garner over time a pretty strong feeling of like, hey, this guy's all right. Like every time they're around, they know what they're talking about. They might not be able to like help me all the time, but they're interested in what I'm doing and what have you.
Yeah. The I think the way I'd kind of put it before with the way elves looked at magical learning, at least, was that with their longer lifespans, they consider like the way humans learn magic as being recklessly fast. So like an elf would spend 20 years just getting to the same level that maybe like a sort of low level, not, you know, kind of in terms of breadth of study, they would focus on one thing for much longer and to learn it to perfection, sort of thing. Whereas your sort of human apprentice is getting a crash course over the course of a few years of like, right, okay, that's this type of magic. Here's how you do prestidigitation. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. Right, okay, now you can focus on stuff. Now you can do the basics, whereas an elf would spend decades, maybe, even getting to the point where they're like, I will now expand my horizons, sort of thing. Simply purely down to the differences in lifespan kind of thing. So they look at the way, you know, not just humans, but humans are kind of the majority. You know, the shorter lived species, and go like, these people are like crashing through, just they should be spending longer on this. They appreciate that they can't, but they look at them as like, not amateurs, but like...
But they're playing with fire.
Yeah,
literally in some cases.
They're like children playing with fire, basically, but short-lived children. I don't, you know what I'm saying, sort of thing. Like that, the elves take a little bit of a kind of snooty pride in like we have spent decades perfecting our usage of this knowledge and stuff. Whereas a human could join the Arcanium at 18 and graduate by 25, sort of thing, and be considered like, oh no, you're a competent wizard, sort of thing.
Maybe on that basis, then, I mean, I don't know if you're with me on this. Like, maybe the Grandmaster's an elf, but I'm this character that I'm kind of coming together with here. I feel like maybe they started young, like that they are young for an elf, and that they are moving at the same pace as everybody else. That they don't have that attitude, and that again would be part of why everybody else is kind of like, oh yeah, this person's cool.
So maybe like an elf who didn't grow up in an elven city, you know.
Well, local, it would make sense. Perhaps somebody that's like knows Vallanna itself and can ingratiate themselves on every level.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, because there's definitely, it's not just like no elves in the human cities. There's going to be some who live there. Yeah, I like that idea. So someone who's kind of grown up more in the kind of regular culture of Vallanna and Vallanna.
Vallanna, sorry, I'm terrible.
Every time. I will send you a card with the pronunciation.
Vallanna. Yeah. Vallanna. Prestidigitation. I can say words.
Yeah,
I swear.
So yeah, maybe they're like, while their parents might be a bit more traditional, we're still talking decades ago, probably, aren't we? If they've gotten up to the level of Grandmaster, they're probably, you know, there's no 25-year-olds getting elected to Grandmaster. This isn't Boss Baby.
Taking the thought a bit further, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for
with the character origin, potentially. How do you like this as an idea? Where elves, people are ingratiated, there's no cultural limits within the city and what have you. So the elves that are magically inclined typically will leave the city and go to the elven commune, wherever it is that training is taking place.
Yeah.
Would you say it's like maybe a coming of age thing, that like maybe at a certain age you would be sent to the Arcanium as a human or one of the other races, and that typically the elves would go to the other place at a certain coming of age point? Would that be sensible? Or?
That would be sensible. I would think probably the Arcanium maybe takes in, might take in some, younger prodigies, but by and large you're starting there when you're about 18, sort of thing. It's more sort of more of a university feel than a sending children to magic school kind of feel.
Cool. So I'm thinking that within Vallanna, they would have it where you're growing up there, that the magic users within a local area would probably know each other to some extent. And it's a known factor of like, it's almost like going to college or university, and the kids are like, where are you going? And there's a kind of like a sense of just inevitability to most of it. Like, oh, of course, they're an elf, they're going there. This elf, in spite of his family's choices or her family's choices, potentially maybe went, no, I want to stay here. I'm more interested in training with my friends that I already know, and bucked tradition in some respect, that their family might not have been into that.
You're talking like Spock not going to the Vulcan Science Academy.
I wasn't thinking in those terms, but yes, I suppose so.
Yeah, sorry. It's a little bit different because obviously Spock's half human. But I like that as a sort of like, maybe the parents kind of assume, they knew that they were having an interest in magic, and obviously the coming of age times for elves are different than others just because of the longer lifespan. I haven't got it to hand, but I've kind of basically haven't really diverged much from the standard D&D thing for elves, which is why Enethe, Jason's character, even though he's like 120, is basically like a 22-year-old sort of thing.
Why so edgy?
Yeah. So we're talking maybe, again, I haven't got the numbers to hand, but maybe not, 50, 60 years old or something is when the elves would start thinking about, okay, I will attend the, whatever we're going to call it, elven place in, maybe there's ones in each of the elven cities or something. So that elf has sort of got to 50, 60, has decided, I would rather, has become ingratiated, likes living in Vallanna, has, they've spent decades there, psychologically as an elf, they're still sort of considered like culturally as an elf, they'd be considered like, oh, you're an adolescent sort of thing, even though they're sort of maybe 50, 60 years old sort of thing. And they've decided, well, no, I love it here. I want to stay here. This is more the connection I feel more of a connection to these type of people than I do, in the Elven City.
Mm-hmm.
And has joined the Arcanium at basically an older age than most people would, but has sort of, like you say, cast off that sort of cultural expectation a bit and gone, I'm going to go here. Yeah, I like that.
And perhaps, like, as well alongside that, it could be that they, living in the city, they've seen the Grand Arcanium's work. Like, they've been around it for a long time. They've got a respect for it. And that this, in terms of, like, seeing that work, respecting it, wanting to be a part of it, making that a known factor as well, and that they, in some way, shape, or form, have sacrificed potentially because of hardship with their family or whatever, and that becomes a known thing. All of these factors add together to create a good story as to why should they be the Grand Master. They have always lived in service of the Grand Arcanium. As soon as they realized their magical potential, that's where they went and followed up.
Well, here's a thought then on that lines. Maybe this is the other weird. It doesn't really track too much. This is where the elves, culturally are adolescent at this point. Doesn't really track. Is that elves reach physical maturity at the same rate as regular humans.
Mm-hmm.
So how about this as a thing then, that maybe as a child, and I'm talking like proper child, like, growing up 7, 8, 9, that sort of age, their best friend was a human who lived next door or whatever, wherever, and that human went on to join the Arcanium, and then that human has grown up, gotten to sort of 50, 60 years old, is becoming an old person, and this finally got to the age where they're elf. They've been close their whole lives. This elf has finally reached what they think is the maturity level to decide where they want to go, whereas this human has been a wizard for 40 years. Sort of thing.
I like that as a dynamic.
They're still good friends, sort of thing. And maybe this human vouches for them, who's, I'm not saying make the human like a high circle member or whatever, but has been doing it for long enough that they have a level of clout that they can sort of put a word in and have the Arcanium sort of look favourably on this, on the elf joining. Maybe it's a rarity in that much.
Leg up.
Yeah, give them a bit of a sort of, I can get you, if not sort of jump over any administrative hurdles, because there might not be any, but maybe is able to sort of say, okay, when you're there, you want to talk to this person. They know all this stuff. If you want to talk to Professor so-and-so, if you want to learn about this, that sort of thing. It would give them the inside baseball on it and be like, here's my 40 years of experience sort of thing. And yeah,
that in combination with that passion and interest in actually doing things and advancing there, it's an ideal start.
Yeah.
And it could be that they move between departments, that they become known, that they get that reputation I already talked about amongst the people that then go on to sit on the council. And then when time comes, they're brought into the council, and perhaps it could even be that it could be an unprecedented thing of where we talked about the Grandmaster leaving and a new council member being brought to the table at the same time. That this guy has been the very first person who was brought to the table and then immediately made Grandmaster at the next opportunity.
That makes sense. Yeah. I like that.
And it's almost like it's seen as a meteoric rise to...
Well, here's a thought that actually maybe I had. So, see how this grabs you. So, they're not going to go straight from sort of graduating to becoming a master to immediately going high. So, that's not going to be like the very next day sort of thing. What if their friend who got them into it was the previous Grand Master eventually sort of thing? So when they kind of sponsored their entry or however into the Arcanium itself, they just were like a well-respected older member, maybe not on the high circle, maybe but considered like the lower, a master but not a master of the high circle sort of thing. By the time this elf makes it through sort of training, apprenticeship, graduates, this friend is onto the high circle. It's sort of 10 years later, maybe, should we say. Elf gets a bit more experience. Their friend is then master of the high circle. Puts their name forward as like, I think this individual would do well. So this is their childhood friend who's now an older man, maybe 78, 80 years old. Very much sort of like had the lifelong career as a well-respected arcanist and has reached the top of their profession, basically. And they convince people to let this elf onto the high circle, and then not shortly afterwards, but not that long after, their friend peacefully dies of old age, sort of thing, leaving that slot open. And they're sort of in the sort of position of being like, well, you're actually technically older than everybody else on this council, but you're the newest member, but you are well respected. And there's maybe this bit of a political thing of like, this would be good outreach to the elves, sort of thing. So
yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of like you say, that meteoric rise, really, or at least on the elven time scale of like, oh, okay, I kind of joined, and then within 10 years or so, I'm on the High Council, and within another couple of years, I'm in charge of this place, sort of thing. And I'm, mentally, I'm maybe 20, sort of thing. Yeah. Although, reality, they're, I don't know, 80, 90 years old, something like that, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's ideal.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Shall we try and figure out put a pin on a gender and a name at this point? Yes. I feel like we've got enough bits and pieces, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like that none of that is none of the story is dependent on the gender or anything like that. So we can that's a good thing to come back to, and maybe that's something to think about. Names are terrible to come up with on the spot as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and they ultimately they are just arbitrary like that. You can just mash syllables sometimes and be like, yeah, that sounds vaguely along the lines of what it should be.
I mean, most of the time, yeah. Okay, so we sort of the other thing I thought maybe we could talk about then, as we're talking about the council, then rather than coming up with a lot of characters, we could kind of come up with their sort of general, sort of what their specialization, not so much specializations, but kind of the it's generally kind of considered that the Grandmaster should be someone who's pretty proficient at most things, and is sort of a good representative as a sort of figurehead, like you said earlier. But I feel like it might be an idea to have like, okay, the high circle should have an expert generally in most of the disciplines on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. These would be the people that are the most proficient in each school of magic, as well as a couple of other disciplines where we've talked about the idea of these people being relic keepers after a fashion. You'd have to have the people that go out and get that, whatever you call that group. Trying to think of a good term for it.
Well, that's we'll get back to that. But this is, I mean, then that's how we get to Madai being the chronomancer. That's right. We're backing into this bad pun on Morris Day and the Time. But he's got the title of the Chronomancer because he's like the pinnacle of like the Arcanium's understanding of like time-based magic, and they feel like he's earned that title of like he's our time dude, kind of thing. Maybe they don't all have such a title like that. But there's just this sort of general level of respect of like, oh, this guy is the master of fire or something, the flame wizard.
How ostentatious are some of these people potentially going to be? I mean, you can go some pretty extreme names.
Hang on, let me bring up
the elemental master.
No, that's how we can bring in. Like, 'cause I feel there's the one thing actually that I feel with our setting, and I've been a little bit sort of thinking it for a little while, is that a lot of the sort of setting itself is maybe a little bit more civilized, or at least it has had that feeling for me that we've maybe made it a bit more civilized than the sort of Forgotten Realms style standard D&D. You know what I mean? At least the feel of this country does.
Yes.
So we've maybe lost...
Like, to me, that everywhere's quite so wild for there to be such thriving trade routes and major cities.
And I do like it how it is, but I feel like we've lost a little bit of that kind of like, I am so-and-so, master of illusion, sort of, that kind of thing. So this might be a way for us to bring that in. So maybe there's one who's like the illusionist or something. they don't all need to be the same sort of form, I guess, but like some of them might be a bit straightforward, like the seeing eye or something is like the divination master. And there might just be one that is just like transmutation professor or something. No, or not professor, but you know what I mean, that kind of, I feel like we should have at least one of each of the schools, maybe apart from necromancy.
Because that's the one that's a bit like,
that
guy at the table.
Yeah, maybe don't give that guy we don't let him on the council. That's just creepy Jeff in the cemetery. So yeah, that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 schools of magic.
Mm-hmm.
Plus we've got the chronomancer already, although I don't know what that would fall under. Let me search.
Perhaps because it's so specific, that guy has kind of got his place in and of itself.
Yeah.
And that's even with the other school, even if there is time magic that falls underneath one of the categories.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 9th level spell called Time Stop that is a transmutation spell.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like it looking at it is like, okay, this is a very specialized thing. We just let him deal with all the time stuff. Yeah, maybe the one who's sort of generally transmutation can also do some time magic, but their understanding is not anywhere near as sort of near the level. Yeah.
Can't modulate it quite the same way. Oh, sorry. If you're thinking about ones beyond the schools, like, because if that's 7 schools, and then we've got the
8,
time guy on top,
then there's 4 other
8.
positions.
There's 4 positions. So, like I said, I think we've got the relic masters or the keepers of the relics.
That's a good one. Yeah,
that's got to be factored in somewhere. There's got to be a certain amount of just pure logistics, like the most boring non-wizardy wizard just does the kind of like, he makes sure the toilets are sorted, or maybe make sure the kitchen's stocked and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe that one is just like the headmaster of the sort of Ascension Spires kind of thing. Maybe not headmaster's not the term, but you know what I mean, the sort of the head of learning
or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe there's one that's one of the 4 is like the leader of that second kind of investigation and handling faction. We haven't got a name for them yet.
They're something to do with history, the scribes.
But the scribes has more of a kind of feeling of learning to me. Like I'm talking about the guys who were basically the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, like the ones who were going out there being like, oh, there's been an incident, we need to fucking rock up. And
I was thinking that was the relic keepers to some extent. Or maybe
that works,
if you're thinking
but I
had to go to like another faction, that the relic keepers are the guys that stay within the place and they know what all the things are down there and they make sure it doesn't get out. Whereas there's the other guys that go out and get the things to put down there.
Yeah, because I feel like it's a big part of the organization that they are dealing with relics and dealing with stuff. So I feel like they would maybe have more than one representative on the council. So if it's sort of split between the archivists, sort of like you say, the relic keepers is the ones who are in charge of the vaults and stuff, and then there's the one who's in charge of like the field teams. So they're sort of both. That's the 2 sides of the coin of that other thing of like the ones who are, you know, are you enough of a badass to go out and fight evil wizards? Sort of ones, and then there's are you enough of a badass to sit here and keep an eye on this ledger? Sort of, you know, 2 sides of that one.
Perhaps it's not the right tone, but I'm thinking for like if you're going to go out and this group of people, this group of wizards that was established to go out and rein in other people and like bring power in check, that maybe you could call them the leash. Or potentially that's a little bit, I don't know, it's got a bit of a harsh tone to it, and that could potentially be maybe within the council, like the leash are the ones that have to go out into the world. They're the hard-bitten ones that perhaps that's the nulled guy at the table that everybody else is a little bit scared of, potentially. That something along those lines is what's going through my head.
Yeah. That name might be a little bit harsher than I'm thinking, because I think the idea is that these guys are still kind of like sort of, there is a bit of an investigation bit to it. They're not just like showing up and like guns are blazing, sort of like.
Yeah, it's not an inquisition.
No.
That's where, I think. of something that's like a lesser, something along those lines, but lesser.
Along the lines of like the Watchers, but like more proactive. Sort of, yeah. Well, either way, though, this second faction is very much going to be like a minority in terms of those who've graduated. Like the majority of people who will run through the sort of Arcanians learning thing, some of them might stay there as continuing their studies in private. Some of them might start teaching. I would think a lot of them would just return to their various communities and be like, okay, now I'm all set. Now I'm a local wizard, sort of thing. But then there's going to be this sort of second, sort of much smaller kind of group. Maybe they are kind of headhunted and sort of like specifically recruited as like, because there's got to be a sort of certain amount of organization in this smaller faction to be like, okay, now you're the people, you're the best of the best when it comes to handling this stuff, or or you've shown some aptitude in it, so we want you for this group, kind of thing. Not sort of militarized or whatever, but you know what I mean. They are kind of a bit more sort of, okay, we're the professionals, sort of thing.
How's this? I think I might have a name. The Eyes of the Arcanium.
Okay. So like and then that gets colloquially shortened to the eyes, sort of thing.
Yeah. And then it would be the kind of thing where you might receive a missive if you're potentially stepping out of line that says the Eyes of the Arcanium are watching, or something like that. And that's your kind of like, hey, fix yourself up before we have to come around and do it for you, kind of heads up. And that way it maintains a sort of authority, which is required, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily quite as like, hey, we're going to turn up and wreck your day. It's more like, look, we're watching. We're always watching.
Yeah. I like that. You said it's not an Inquisition, but I can't help but think of the Inquisition symbol from Dragon Age Inquisition being a giant eye. But, I like that as a sort of...
Symbolism. It's hard not to go for an eye when you're going for, like, these guys are the ones that are overwatching everything. They're keeping a lookout.
Yeah. I mean, they are, aren't they? That's the thing, they're sort of... Like I say, they're kind of on the lookout for any sort of things that may require their attention. And also, I would think a part of it would be keeping an eye on those ones who showed a certain amount of magical aptitude, but didn't want to come and join the Arcanium. They're sort of not like actively watching them all the time, but maybe just like, okay, we'll just make a note in case this is a problem that may, in case this is a future problem, sort of thing.
That's it. There would be a network, perhaps. That this would be like, not most of the eyes are not within the actual Grand Arcaneum at all. They're out there as agents, as it were, and they would report back. And
there's sort of a bit of a network of informants, but then there are also these the ones who are sort of the main. Yeah, they rely heavily on members of the public who have gained their trust, sort of keeping an eye on stuff. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Alongside the idea where you'd already said that like a lot of wizards will not stay at the Arcanium after their training, that they will go out into the world, that they might not necessarily be working for them all the time, but should they pick up pertinent information, they will effectively become an eye of the Arcanium at that moment.
I follow.
They might
So maybe it's sort of it's like they're just sort of, that's part of the graduation thing of like, okay, go forth, be back in your communities, see anything weird, let us know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, that makes more sense rather than like, I was sort of thinking it was straying a little bit too close to like, quick, inform on your friends and neighbours sort of thing.
No,
But,
I'm thinking it's more like, this is just a known thing of like, wizards talk to each other.
Yeah. Okay, I prefer that, I think.
Affiliated wizards will, of course, pass information back to the Arcanium.
Yeah, and even if it's just like, I heard a rumour of this, maybe you guys want to look into it or something. Yeah,
if you're into illicit work, then it's a kind of known thing of like, don't talk to wizards. Wizards talk to each other. That kind of thing. You never know what might be interesting to them and that they might pass on, and it might mess up your plan.
Yeah. We got a lot of eye imagery going on.
Yes. I was going to comment on that and say, like, perhaps this is the last eye that I'm certainly going to mention, because, between the magical objects and this, it's...
I feel like that's more of a coincidence, really, though.
Plus, ultimately, it's the kind of thing where it is symbolic, and that it's history times after a fashion. It's fake history times, but within that, the frame of reference is kind of like body parts and things that exist in nature and that kind of stuff.
Well, maybe we can come up with a synonym for like watchers instead of the eyes. I like the eyes, but just the sentinels.
Yeah, sentinels. I mean, it's got the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's got like sentiment to it.
Because it's sort of like they're guarding against the sort of. They're guarding against the, a magical thing going wrong and hurting a bunch of people.
Yeah, and that plays into the whole, like, it's a good name for the wizards that have gone out into the world that aren't necessarily working all the time for the Arcanium, but are affiliated, that they are, forever they are sentinels. They're always on the watch because of their training. That's the nature of the deal. And yeah, I like it. And that works better than
unless we have it so that the ones who are unless we have it so the ones who are actively like the ones going out and having to do like the containment stuff, they're the sentinels, and then everybody else they're just like they're just arcanists. They're all graduated members, and they let the sentinels know, sort of thing. Like the sentinel is the sentinels are their own faction. I'm thinking,
okay,
sort of thing. So then they when you join them, you get the title of like, oh, I'm Sentinel, blah blah blah. That way, I guess one of the ones in the circle could be like, I keep using high Sentinel, such or such, or whatever. I don't know. I kind of, like I say, I'm kind of in my head. I've got this sort of separation between most of the people who graduate, and then the Sentinels are like almost like a sub-organization sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it works. No, I don't have much more to say other than that, I suppose.
Fair enough.
My mind just spammed for a second. It's like, yes, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think there's a lot of stuff here we can play with in terms of like, I've got an expansion to the history bit I can write based on how we started the discussion. We got a character I can work up as the current Grandmaster, and a bit more of a sort of look down into the sort of members of the High Circle, and now obviously if we're going with Sentinels, but can always have a bit of a think about that. Is there anything else you think we should add on this today?
I
feel like unlike
specific.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we could add like a location or something that were part of the Grand Arcaneum. I mean, I don't know if you had an idea of like something fun to finish up with, just in terms of like let's let our minds go a little bit.
Well, I've kind of got an idea of their headquarters is in Vallanna. It's the Ascension Spires. I'm sort of trying hard to not make it just like let's squash together Unseen University and Hogwarts sort of.
Yes, I'm very aware of this, especially because I'm listening to a Discworld audio book right now. So I'm very conscious of not leaning into that kind of stuff. I was just thinking in terms of like, I mean, it's not necessarily even a silly idea, but I kind of like the idea of at least one place. And this might just be one place, literally, or maybe it would just be a standardized place within most of the Arcanium like properties, as it were, where it's like a hall of silence, where this is a place to study, this is a place to meditate, this is a place where there is a magical field that is suppressing sound, and that entering this place is a kind of, I don't know, an escape from the world, perhaps.
Okay.
And I just liked it as a concept of like, wizards might potentially where they're I mean, is it fair to say that they have to like visualize, conceptualize, think about what they're doing to a great deal, and that the higher level magics require a great deal of that you have to conceptualize a great deal in order to kind of do it, at least in terms of like the lore of it.
I mean, it's kind of written differently in a lot of different settings and things. The general sort of thing though is that different types of magic users in D&D are just sort of different flavors, and they're all channeling stuff differently. So like your wizards like Prance are very much kind of they're like sort of nerds who have learned things by learning the theory behind it and everything, so they know exactly how they're channeling the powers and why it works logically, if that makes sense. Even if Prance is a little bit kind of on the fringe of knowing why he's doing anything.
He's got kind of, I don't know, implicit. Like his is like muscle memory, where other people have it as conscious thought.
Yeah. Warlocks are like pulling the power from a patron, so I feel like there's not going to be any warlocks going to the Arcanium, really. That's a different sort of flavour of that completely, really. I feel like that's more of an implicit, like the patron granting them the power as they go, sort of thing. Sorcerers, what is the difference? More of a kind of sort of raw, unexplained powers kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's less kind of learned and more kind of implicit. So I feel like all of them, though, kind of involve a little bit of kind of manipulation of energies sort of thing, if that makes sense. But it's the level at which, the different flavors are kind of like the different, I guess, the different ways that they're approaching that act, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Arcanium is going to be more focused, I think, on the wizard side of things. That's not to say they're not going to get sorcerers coming there and like having to have like a different style of learning. They're still going to be there's still going to be a bit of sort of teaching them to sort of harness that power. So maybe the sorcerer kind of archetype, should we say? I mean, is more of a kind of, these are the naturally gifted, naturally seem to be doing stuff already without the lessons, if that makes sense. So they're more kind of being taught to harness what they're already doing.
Potentially a bit more unpredictable, a bit more wild.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, wild magic sorcerer is a type of sorcerer you can make,
Well, there you go then.
I have an unpredictable effects table to roll on with wild magic sorcerers, So, yeah. I forgot how we got onto that.
My idea was the quiet room, basically.
Yeah, no, I like that idea.
I'm just the only kind of, I suppose, step beyond like the concept is that in terms of D&D, I think it would just be an interesting space for a group of characters to just wander into and be like, try to talk to each other, and then the game master can turn around and be like, you can't hear each other. Like, you just cannot hear each other. Don't try talking right now because you can't hear each other.
No, I'm totally on board with that, and I feel like that's an interesting addition to this, like, to the property, that like maybe the Ascension Spires has got a lot of weird places in it. So like if you need me, I will be in the contemplation chamber, and it's just like you step into it and it's just like you can't see anything and you can't hear anything and you can't make any sound. Yeah. But it's almost just like a room.
Yeah, and it's not even like it's not hidden away. It's a place that serves a purpose as far as the wizards and that anybody walking into it that isn't a wizard or isn't ingratiated into the ways of this group of wizards would just be like, what the hell? My eyes have switched off. How is this happening?
Whereas, and then it's sort of, we don't even really need to explain how the wizards know how to get out, kind of thing. It's just one of those things that like you see Doctor Strange just doing stuff, and you're like, how would he know what to do? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, like a sort of thing. It's just like, we don't need to explain that. This is
there's got to be like a few spells to do with sensing spaces and locations and stuff, and then within that, it's a training chamber as well as anything else. If that's the case,
it's not like a danger room. It's more of a
quiet. Because I mean, what's the worst that happens? You get lost in there. Then maybe on the outside of the room, there's like a big long hook, like a shepherd's crook, and occasionally a wizard will get stuck in there, and somebody has to come to the door and be like, "Oh bloody hell!" Another one, and grab the crook and pull them towards the door.
Like maybe it's not a very big room; it just seems very big.
Yeah, it's quite easy to just turn around in a circle over and over again and not quite realise you're doing it.
Maybe it is. There's like a sign on it saying for no first year novices or something like that, because it's sort of you do not enter unless you can do these things, and there's a list of stuff.
Yeah,
and a little sign off sheet on the side of it saying you've had your permission slip.
I like this because it's not implicitly humorous, but there's definitely angles for both danger and humor to occur in this place.
Oh yeah, if it was in a movie, it could very much be played for laughs. It's like, oh my god, this is a weird chamber, and like it's the quiet room. And then you give it to a different director, and it's just like this kind of epic, unknowable void that they're sat in with, like the camera zooms in on a Dutch angle and everything as this powerful wizard is just alone with their thoughts. And you give it to another director, and it's just like, I can't see what is happening. Where am I? What's Yeah. No, I like it as a concept. That's good. I will I will put that into my Ascension Spires article. I think as like, because there's got to be I feel like we should have a section of like, hey, here's some weird stuff that's here.
Yeah. Here's all the unusual, like very specific things that are in these places.
For sure. Yeah, I like it. But yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with that.
Likewise.
Yeah. If you didn't have anything else to add, I think we could probably call that to a close there then for today.
Yeah,
I always forget how we end these episodes.
I think we've come up with some decent stuff, and it was nice to get to add. Like, I think you've done it on each one of these previously. Like somebody gets to add something at the end. Like there's my next edition is the Quiet Room.
Yeah. No, I like it, and it tied in neatly with what we were already talking about, which they don't always. So,
indeed,
yeah.
Thinking a bit more in line this time, and smaller scale.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll call that a day then. There. Have you got anything you want to plug? Anything like that before we end this?
You can follow me on Twitter and a variety of places at Monkey Magic Eden. Find me on Twitch and Steam and all kinds of places with that username. And on Saturdays, you can join us. Usually AJ's part of the mix, as well as a bunch of other people from Penance RPG and a variety of other places. Anyone's welcome. We play Jackbox games over on Twitch. I host the games. You join the chat over on the Pretending with Dice Discord. And yeah, we've had a pretty good streak of weeks where we've had nice full sessions, audience members, lots of laughs. Fair warning, this podcast in general is not the sweariest or the dirtiest.
Well, this one hasn't been, but some of them do get a bit like it.
Sometimes. But the Jackbox ones are 100% sweary dirty. So brace your mind if you're going to join us for that.
Yeah. I will concur. Yeah, come and join us on our Discord server and come and play Jackbox on Saturdays. It's been a lot of fun. Links to our Discord are on I think it's on the contact page of our Podbean site. They're definitely on our Twitter bio. I'm just making this all 100% unprofessional by clicking through our website to try and find where I put that.
It's fine.
Yeah, there's a link to our Discord on the contact page of our Podbean site and also our Twitter bio. So yeah, come join us on there, hang out. As we said, Saturday nights is game night, and there's a lot of podcast central discussion on there about our different story arcs and things, as well as place to post your own links, post some memes, just hang out and have a fun chat. So yeah, come and hang out. I don't know when we'll be back with the next bit of our D&D story, because we're currently waiting to see how long our area is in tier 2 of COVID lockdown. We can't record again with our group until that is over. So yeah, watch this space. Really, I'm hoping we're going to be able to get at least another world building episode out for you though before the end of the year. Actually, that's calendar dependent, isn't it? The next one would be on Christmas Eve if it does go out. So maybe that might be.
I think you can allow yourself a week off. In fairness, in that case.
Well, no, because otherwise this will be the only one that goes out this month, and I would like to put out two. Keep to our schedule. We'll see how we go. Either way, keep an eye on your feeds and stuff. We might be back in 2 weeks with another world building one. But yeah, who knows? Because I don't. Yeah, as always, though, in the meantime, you can get us on all of the social medias at Pretend with Dice. Email us at pretendingwithdice@outlook.com. You could still be the first 3.5 years in. That title is still up for grabs. Even if it's just to send me a, hey, AJ, here's an email kind of thing. And
the race is on now.
Yeah. Who will be the first? Who is even still listening to the end of this episode? We also have a Ko-Fi page if the spirit grabs you to chuck us some of your hard-earned pennies. We're at ko-fi.com/pretendingwithdice. Don't feel like it's an obligation at all or anything. It's all just appreciated. That's the thing. It all goes towards helping our hosting costs and whatnot. So, yeah, I think I've pretty much covered everything, considering I haven't got my usual script in front of me for the end of episodes.
I'm struggling to think of anything promotion-wise that's necessary. I think you've covered the basics.
I don't think I've missed anything. So yeah, maybe see you in 2 weeks. If not, we'll see you in 2021. No matter what, though, we will always be hanging out on Discord and stuff, and Twitter and so forth. So yeah, come and chat with us. we'll call it a day there then, I think. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye-bye.